Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News. Today, Israel's government approved plans for its forces to capture the entirety of the Gaza Strip and remain in the occupied territory indefinitely, in a move that will no doubt spark fierce international condemnation. While Israel has the political cover to attempt such an operation, is it actually feasible with the resistance still in place and their own military issues? Tonight on State of Play, we are joined by Jon Elmer of Electronic Intifada. He is a Canadian writer and photojournalist specializing in the Middle East and Canadian foreign and military policy. Has lived and reported extensively from the West Bank and Gaza Strip to discuss what may transpire on the ground in the coming days and what the situation is right now. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, so we got a number of items to discuss today. The months-long maximum pressure blockade of Gaza that continues with some 70,000 children hospitalized from malnutrition, according to some reports. The Israeli military has called up tens of thousands of reservists to conquer Gaza and occupy it again indefinitely. And of course, Syria was relentlessly bombed over the weekend, and the al-Shara government has yet to respond to Israeli bombing of their military positions, beyond arresting a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. We're going to get into all that. The current president, no matter how you feel about him, is in an impossible political position, etc. We're also going to check in with what's going on in southern Lebanon. Going to get into all that. So also real quick, now we have to, because we exist in a capitalist dystopia, we are on Patreon. We're demonetized on all platforms. And if you're picking up what Mint Press News is putting down with this show and the other articles that are done by the newsroom in terms of investigative journalism, documentaries, etc., check us out on Patreon. If you can't swing it, I get it. Like, share, and subscribe. It's always helpful. Okay. Cool. So the Associated Press, John, broke the story yesterday that, of course, Israel plans to capture the entire Gaza Strip. Officials say as tens of thousands of reservists are called up. Yes, from what we've seen, it's supposed to be 60,000, but we're both remarking we'll see whether or not those 60,000 troops actually show up to muster.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the problem for many months now. They're not showing up. The Israeli army radio did a tour of the Morag corridor, which is the corridor they cut between Rafah and Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. And the commander was speaking about how they had less than 50% of their combat-ready reserves showing up. So I think that the plan for the Israelis at this point is to call up reserves and then send those reserves into the places where their standing army is, and then pull their standing army and send them to Gaza, because they know already that they aren't going to have the appropriate numbers respond to this reserve call up. I mean, lots of them have left the country, are back in the United States, carrying out their jobs in New York and whatnot. Many have left to other parts of the world, and many have just essentially negotiated their way out, are essentially in retirement for all intents and purposes. They're done with this war. And this claim by the Israelis that they're going to reoccupy Gaza, these claims that they failed to do throughout the entire war, it's not really clear from their plans how this is going to be any different. They talk about how they're going to stay in areas that they conquer, but that's what they say every time, and they just don't do that. There's been 5 battles of Jabalia. The Israeli military is in Rafah right now fighting the Rafah brigade. They told us in the summer that they had defeated the Rafah brigade. And so these are a lot of this is just psychological operations, but the plan that they're talking about is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, because the army radio report from the IDF said that the plan is to push everybody all the way down into Rafah, which is already a full no-go zone there down in the south. They cut a corridor right where that dotted line is, pretty much. That's the municipality line there, but that is effectively the Morag corridor that used to be an Israeli settlement. And that's agricultural land. So cutting into that wasn't any kind of military accomplishment. They moved through agricultural land, but they made all of Rafah a no-go zone. And so according to this Army radio report, the intention is to push everybody in Gaza down into the south, into Rafah, and then give them the, Trump Riviera voluntary migration plan. So it's like they've put all of their, their biggest fantasies of what could happen with Gaza into this military plan that just doesn't match any of their military capabilities on the ground. We're now, 500 and coming up on 580 days of this war, and the Israeli military hasn't been able to show any of this kind of capability or competence or consistency or resilience. But the resistance has. And so the past, whatever it's been 2 months or so since the ceasefire collapsed, the Israeli military is not fighting in built-up areas against the resistance. The resistance operations, such as they are in the areas where the Israelis do push into the outer edge of the built-up areas. A lot of this talk over the last 2 months is about the Israeli movements in the territory and how 70% of the territory of Gaza is a no-go zone. But that's just buffer zones. That's buffer zones, agricultural land. It's not into the built-up areas where the resistance fights in territorial brigades that are ready to meet the Israelis when they come in. And according to Israeli estimates, according to American intelligence estimates, the Qassam brigades are the same size, if not larger, than they were before the war started. And you can say they have taken significant losses for sure, but they also have a seasoned fighting corps that has survived this war and knows how to fight now. So it's not just all new, new recruits, green recruits. There's a hardened, experienced corps that is able to train these new recruits in a way. So it's not clear with this plan how it's any different than anything that we've been watching for 570 days. Israel could destroy everything. They have full U.S. support. We've seen, some days we see as many as 8 heavy lift aircraft delivering weapons to Israel in their air bridge from the United States. So if the United States is going to back Israel completely, hand in glove, they can destroy anything. They can destroy all of Gaza, but they can't achieve their military goals. They can't destroy the Qassam brigades. They can't return their captives. And they can't have any strategic success in the sense that they intended, which was that Gaza would no longer be a threat to Israel, which is one of their main objectives of the war. It's just very difficult to see what is going to be different this time than in the previous, like we're coming up on 2 years now. What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we'll see is something we've already seen before because it's the only thing that they can do. They'll invade populated areas, kind of. Of course, you reference them not really going into the urban areas because they've essentially created Stalingrad 2.0 for themselves. And we talked about before about how, like, if you're a mechanized infantry force, you definitely don't want catalyzing terrain features and rubble because it channels you into places where you can put like explosively formed penetrators and like armor penetrating IEDs and stuff like that. And that's why they don't want to go in there.
And the fighters can use all that rubble as concealment and cover. And that is the thing that the Israelis, they've done so much destructive. They call it devastated terrain warfare because they've had to come up with a new name for how to fight in these areas because they have difficulty even marking where they are because all the buildings are destroyed. So when they're trying to call in close air support and things like that, they don't have anything, they can't say the big red building because the big red building doesn't exist. So yeah, it's very difficult to see what would be different this time. It would be one thing if you had a significantly depleted fighting force in the resistance. But I've been following them hour by hour for the last 575 days, and I don't see a depletement of the sort that would allow Israel to run and conquer these areas that they said. I'm old enough to remember November 2023 when they said that they had operational control, that they had conquered Beit Hanun. And Beit Hanun has been fighting all through this war, right up to the ceasefire. Beit Hanun carried out the most spectacular operations in January when they were supposed to be destroyed a year and a half before that. They carried out 25 qualitative operations against the Israelis, blowing them up in every different kind of way, using tunnels, using unexploded ordnance, using all of their appropriate weapons that they have developed. And then the same thing in Beit Hanun. And then the ceasefire came. We saw the ceasefire, the prisoner exchange, and then Israel returns to war in Beit Hanun, and they're hit by these spectacular ambushes where fighters come up from a tunnel behind Israeli lines, hit their command jeep in a convoy. We saw last week a number of twin sniper operations, like 50 cal sniper operations against the same target from two different snipers, which are devastating, as we saw on video. And so this is Beit Hanun. This is the place they said they conquered over and over and over again. So what's the difference this time when they say they're going to conquer? I don't see it. I mean, the psychological impact is going to be devastating. We're talking about it. We know people in Gaza are talking about it.
Yeah.
All the aid organizations are talking about it because the implications for the aid organizations, who are at this point virtually locked completely out of Gaza. You know, the siege is now 60 odd days of total blockade of Gaza. And like you said about their tanks, the roads are destroyed. So how you're going to get people en masse to move from the north, which is Israel's intended goal, is to push everybody down into the south, into Rafah, and then give them the ability to leave, voluntarily leave from their, genocidal war that they're carrying out, where they're starving the population, and 1.9 million of the 2.2 or 3 million people that live in Gaza are living in tents. So it's not voluntary. It's just psychologically it's devastating.
Yeah.
And reporting on this is always difficult because you don't want to contribute to that by believing these plans that these plans require you to defeat the resistance. And I don't see that happening. So,
right. I mean, we have 20 years and like the Vietnam War of that not happening too. There's a lot of historical precedents of how they don't just disappear. So I think, again, send mech convoys into populated areas, more forced evacuations, more pamphlets, internal displacement, bombing for a brief period. I think they'll not really do any more than they already have. It's literally just a waste. They'll just lose more troops for no reason. Their plans always fail because they are incapable of implementing anything coherent on the ground. Like the general's plan. I don't know if you guys remember that before. I pass it off to you again, and we talk about basically what we think is going to happen or what you think is going to happen with this. Let's check in with the IDF mouthpieces, because if you read Hebrew media, they are honest about what's going on in Gaza. But I've come through like Haaretz, Mariv, Ynet, like all these different sources about like what this plan is actually going to look like, and it's just as it's just like the rest of their operation, giving like 2009 mission accomplished vibes. So let's just check in for the next minute, and then we'll respond.
And tensions heating up across the Middle East this weekend as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cancels a planned trip to Azerbaijan in light of the developments. Joining us now to discuss is Brigadier General in the Reserves Amir Avivi, founder and CEO of the Israel Defense and Securities Forum. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So lots to discuss today. Let's start with Gaza. The IDF calling tens of thousands of reservists for an expanded operation. So first of all, why now? And what are the goals of this operation? What can we expect?
So I think the IDF is pursuing all the time three main goals. One is improving the defense on the towns along the Gaza Strip. We have to bring back people from kibbutzim like Faraza, which are really close to the border. And in order to do that, we need to push Hamas to the west towards the sea and secure the area. The other thing is mounting the pressure to bring all the hostages. It's crystal clear that Hamas is not pressured enough. They need to be pressured more in order to bring them to the point where they're willing to do a hostage deal without Israel needing to give up its goals of war, without giving up the mission of eradicating Hamas as a governmental and military entity. For this, we need to mount much more pressure. And of course, we are bringing tens of thousands of soldiers to really start conquering more areas in order to create really the terms needed to destroy Hamas.
Okay, well, it looks like the objectives haven't changed since October 10th.
That's literally the plan from the first day, and they're acting like there hasn't been 575 days of ground warfare. 500 days of the 575 days have been ground warfare, and they're unable to achieve. They're not getting their captives back by that method. That it's the opposite. Their captives are going to be killed, which they clearly don't care about. If they want their captives back, there's a very simple path that also goes back to October 2023 about how to get their captives back. And that is through the withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a prisoner exchange. And that prisoner exchange has been on the table for Israel, and they don't want it. They don't want it. I mean, Netanyahu talks about the percentage of captives that they've gotten back. Like he treats these right now, it's soldiers. Those are soldiers that are all being held right now in Gaza. So you're telling your military, as they're about to go in and fight again in these areas, that if
you're a prisoner of war, you're screwed.
Yeah, sorry, we don't care about you. Not only do we not care about you, but we're probably going to kill you. I don't know if that's, you'd know better than me what that does to the esprit de corps of your fighting force. Imagine
it's not great, like maintaining that kind of morale base, like no matter what, like we're going to prioritize coming for you, like the whole, like leave no man behind. That's not just something people say, like you'll endanger an entire operation to not do that. But I see with Israel, completely different behavior that's foreign to me as someone who was in the military and doing combat operations. I don't know how I would function, but like they're completely different than anything I've experienced. They refuse to do night operations. For the most part, don't really use combined arms. They just stay buttoned up in their tanks and don't really get out and clear objectives. They were starting to do that at first. Even up until like the summer of last year, but they've really stopped. It seems like they've stopped doing any of that. Also, they've demolished pretty much all of the civilian infrastructure that they've wanted to do. And I don't know. It just seems like there's nothing fundamentally different now. And I guess like people are acting shocked because it's now like getting actually put into plan. But this plan has been implemented since October 2023. They're just finally being honest about it.
Yeah, and to push to do that what that ex-general said, to push the population westerly,
like literally into the sea.
Yeah, but that's the most combat capable Qassam formations that they're going to meet. That's Shujaiya. That's if you're going to push into Gaza City, that's where the core of their fighting force is. So it's not really clear what they mean by that. And then if they talk about Khan Yunis, they haven't fought in Khan Yunis. They haven't stepped foot in Khan Yunis in more than a year. And the Qassam brigades fight in territorial formations. The Khan Yunis Qassam brigades didn't run down to Rafah and fight in Rafah. They didn't run up to Dar al-Bala and fight in Dar al-Bala. They stay in Khan Yunis. So what have those guys been doing for the last year besides preparing the battle space and their weaponry to carry out that fight? Same with Shujaiya, a historic place in Palestine is basically the beating heart of the resistance, both historically and in this battle as well. That's what they're talking about. If you're going to push people west and then push them down south, these plans don't they don't match with military. They sound good maybe on Israeli television, like that guy who seemed like he was in his car doing that interview.
Yeah.
Took a seatbelt off at least so that we didn't see that. But just it's sound bites for their public and their public itself in Israel. There's, of course, a significant portion that support the war, but there's also a significant portion that want to get their captives back, and they want to have a military that they're conscripted into and effectively for life. Because when they say they're calling up reserves, what they mean is they're calling back guys who are our age to come back from their jobs. So you're essentially a conscript for life, and you're telling them that you don't care about the captives or about their life, because you're uprooting their businesses and their families and causing major strategic damage to their economy.
Taking hundreds of thousands of people out of the workforce indefinitely for such a small country is, we're already seeing the effects. Foreign investment fleeing, small businesses collapsing throughout the country. Yeah.
And a lot of those indicators will take some years to show, right? You can paper over them in this short period of time. Their loan guarantees from the US can help and whatnot. But over the long term, just the fact that the construction industry has been completely shut down now for 2 full years. Their high tech, you can read that in the Financial Times and the Economist, the Capitalist Press, that their high tech, that they pretended was their startup nation, when really it was essentially a welfare project attached to their military. Those jobs are leaving, those people are leaving. That kind of investment, you can say that they test weapons on Gaza that then the world buys. That's a very small proportion of their tech industry. They're using, they're firing arrows out of their quiver that are very difficult to replace. So, but I mean, this is the thing. Netanyahu's government requires these nutty, extreme fascist elements to keep his government in place. And those fascist elements, they're not even elements, they're all that way.
Yeah.
But there's a certain number of them that have the power to step out of the government and collapse their governments, because the Knesset, there's never been a majority. No party in Israel has ever gotten a majority of Knesset seats. It is a requirement to keep their government, to piece together all these disparate, these coalitions. You pull 3 or 4 parties out of Netanyahu's coalition, and his government collapses, and you have to go to an election, which normally wouldn't be that big a deal, which is why Netanyahu's government has had 6 elections in the last 7 years. Because in peacetime, it's not that big a deal to run another election and then try to form another coalition. But at this point, it is a problem for Netanyahu, because if he doesn't win that next election, he's probably going to jail for a number of years. And that alone is an incentive for him to keep fighting. And he knows that he's got those extreme elements that are in his coalition that want the total elimination of Gaza. So he's a terrible person who's being pulled in even worse directions by the coalition that he's in.
Yeah, that he relies on for his base of power and his political cover within the government. So in the meantime, expect more hospital invasions, refugee camps getting dropped, expulsion of populations from areas, evacuation zones into safe zones, which have never been safe and are never safe. But if, they commit to Gaza fully, they leave themselves open in the north, along the Golan Heights and the border, which we can talk about. But, even 60,000 reservists, even if they're going to shift a few like mechanized infantry divisions, like pushing the entire population of almost 2 million people towards the coastline is not something that they have even the numbers to do. So
no, and they couldn't execute that when they called up 300,000. That's what the call up was in October of 2023, was 300,000. And they sent in 5 divisions, full divisions. Right now there's 3 divisions, but they are raggedy divisions right now.
Yeah, and they're mostly just pulling security. They're not doing like any like a lot of patrols or like
no, they can't
force. Yeah,
no, they can't hold territory inside areas where there are fighters, and that is what they're declaring with this plan, is that they are going to do something that, I mean, I wrote it down here somewhere. Netanyahu said, this is different than its predecessors. That's what Netanyahu said. So this operation is going to be somehow different than the one when they had full complement of forces, the mechanical situation with their tanks, the readiness, I guess you'd say, was at its full peak. And now you're saying you're going to do something that you famously couldn't do. You're going to do it now, and then at the end that you're going to drive the population out of Gaza. And I guess their timeline is Trump is going to the Middle East in a week or 10 days from now, and so they're giving this sort of 2-week window of psychological operations to terrorize the population in Gaza. Which is just, this is the difference between talking about what their plans are and talking about what they're capable of doing. The difference between those two stories is the resistance, and the resistance in Gaza is not in a lesser position to carry out a defensive operation or to stymie that plan than they were at the beginning. I don't believe that. We haven't seen the degrading of their force. And in my brief, that's something that I'm constantly looking for. Are they running out of weapons? Are they running out of skilled fighters? Do their ambushes look different? Do their territorial brigades look like they're thinned out in any visible way in analyzing? And I don't see that in the way that they fight. It's not necessary to have 10,000 fighters in a phalanx or something. This is modern, very modern urban guerrilla warfare in a destroyed environment where you have the defenders bunkered in hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels that access all areas of the battle space for defensive, for resupply, for offensive operations, which is what we saw in Beit Hanun in the last couple of weeks. And we're seeing them in field reports. We haven't seen the videos of them yet. But complex ambushes using tunnels have been happening in Rafah in the last 3 days. There's been multiple that killed Israeli soldiers that Israel admitted to. And the bottom line is, unless Israel is going to actually fight in these tunnels, they can't conquer the territory, because the tunnels underneath the territory can move the fighters. There's no front line. You don't have a front line. You move your forces up, they come back up behind in the tunnel, and you're fighting a 360-degree war. And you're not just fighting it on the ground level. You're fighting it underground as well. So there's a lot of advantages for the Gaza resistance to prevent this kind of these terms of like that we will remain in areas that are conquered. That is the thing that kills Israeli soldiers, because they pull out because they cannot maintain control of these areas. So they say, we have operational control. They declare it. It becomes a headline in their media, and people think that they've accomplished something. And then they pull out, because if they were to remain, they would be constant targets. And the longer they remain inside the built up areas, the more capability the resistance has to prepare attacks, to defend themselves against the sharp end of the invasion. So there's just lots of criteria that make it very difficult to see how Israel achieves these military goals, but genocidal goals, those can be achieved because the United States appears to be in full lockstep. You know, there was a window of time when Trump came in when it looked like, you know, he was saying U.S. isn't going to fight any foreign wars, and he seemed to scrap that pretty quickly as he launched a massive multi-carrier war with half of the B-2 bomber stock
in the Indian Ocean. Yeah,
against the Yemenis, 24/7 operations against the Yemenis. You know, it looked like maybe there was that time where things were going to be different, but Trump, there's no difference between these governments in the United States. If you're a Palestinian, you don't see anything different between one president or another, and that's been the case for decades.
Right, and the biggest substantive difference is not even substantive. It's the language of, we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire, which it comes out over the past week that, Biden's inner circle said, no, we literally weren't doing anything.
They couldn't find anyone that heard that term.
Yeah. So, it's only words. Democrats like a little bit more decorum. They like to pretend like they care about human rights. But here's the thing about the military goals. Yes, you brought up, they can't be achieved. I mean, we've talked about it. I think we've been talking about this on both of our platforms for the past 500 and something days, right? But the genocidal goals. Now, forced starvation, no aid has gotten in. Apparently there's like roving gangs that may or may not be backed by Israel as well.
Are almost certainly backed by Israel.
Yeah. Could you go?
I mean, when we look at, just compare those, you have roving bands that can move around and attack aid warehouses. But if the government protects an aid convoy entering Gaza, Israel bombs them. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between those two things? I think it's pretty stark and pretty clear. The starvation is an issue. It's a practical issue that is beginning to really set in. And there was, because of the ceasefire agreements, even though Israel didn't live up to the maximum extent of what they agreed to, there was the capability to stockpile in Gaza to a certain degree, not for the average person, but to warehouse a certain amount of the aid that came in during that ceasefire. But that period has passed, and we're starting to get into really dire territory. So if the Israelis are saying that they're not going to allow aid in during this operation that is going to take a long time to not accomplish, like we have pointed out in this show, that's a desperate situation. That is, this whole thing has been horrific to watch, but there's dark days in store. And the military has talked about that they don't want to be the ones handing out the aid, right? They don't want to be they said it yesterday outright. The chief of staff said he doesn't want their soldiers handing out aid. And so Israel's trying to operate around the NGO establishment and the United Nations Relief Work Agency for Palestinian refugees, who carry out all the aid distribution. The goal is to work around them somehow through the private sector. This is not a method for getting emergency aid distributed widely to people in Gaza. So I know from a humanitarian, from a genocidal perspective, these are dark days in store.
Yeah, and we'll see just how far along we'll continue to play cover for him. I don't see it stopping. I don't see it stopping from Europe. Forced famine in conjunction with a massive ground operation is something we haven't really seen quite yet. There was still good aid coming in when they were doing the more large-scale maneuvers throughout the north of the Gaza Strip, but now it's just nothing. and more displacement. And I think it's interesting that you brought up the 2 weeks or 10 days of psychological operations that are going on in the Gaza Strip. It's not just with the people in Gaza to like break their will and be like, okay, the hammer's coming, not sure exactly when, but it's going to happen. But it's also meant to prime Western audiences for it as well. Before they first bombed Al Shifa Hospital, they did this massive 2-week-long propaganda campaign about like having CGI Hamas people walking through like, tunnels in the hospital that didn't even have doors and they weren't even connected. It was absolutely absurd. But this kind of information operation is going on. And just for the audience, this is kind of what they're putting out. Notice how, let me see, screen recording. Notice how, sorry, my producer's not here right now and I'm so bad at technology. Bear with me, guys. It's 5. Okay, number 5. Oh, geez. Now I have to find it. All right, yes. Notice how all of these are in English.
Not apologize for protecting our people. We will not apologize for operating to dismantle Hamas. We will not apologize for fighting for our future where our civilians can live without fear. Hamas continues to dig tunnels under civilian homes in Gaza, arm itself, and threaten the lives of Israelis and Gazans alike. 59 innocent civilians are still being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza.
And as a point of correction, you said you assert that these are overwhelmingly military personnel at this point.
Yes, the alive ones are.
Yes.
Since resuming operations in Gaza, the IDF has carried out targeted strikes against terrorist infrastructure, located and dismantled underground tunnel networks, seized stockpiles of explosives, weapons, and missiles, and eliminated Hamas commanders responsible for numerous attacks against Israeli civilians. As long as Hamas continues to threaten the people of Israel, we will continue to act and operate to protect our civilians and eliminate Hamas.
Okay, yes, I do follow the IDF's official channel, and it's generally...
It's part of our job. We have to do it.
Yeah, so sorry to subject you to that. But anyways, so they're going to go ahead with this, I guess. You've followed, you've been to Gaza, you've reported on Palestine for a long time. Do you think there's any place where they like have to stop? Like what in your estimation, what would stop this insanity?
I mean, this has been the whole part of being a human for the last 2 years. All of the things that we thought would stop at some point, even the most cynical eye of, international community, or international law, which, believe me, I had that cynical eye.
Mm-hmm.
We believed there was some kind of a red line. I mean, even that video that you just showed, they don't even need to do those videos anymore. I don't even know why they do those. At the first Shifa invasion, people were appalled that they were going to attack hospitals. They structurally systematically attacked all of the hospitals, and they make statements straight up when they bombed the hospital a couple weeks ago, and they just said it was a command center, and they published a map of it and showed where there was command centers in the hospital, and they just destroyed the hospital. I don't know where the line is, and it's scary for people in Gaza. Because what is the line for Gazans to say, for Gazawis to say, we can't stand this anymore? I mean, these were things at the beginning of the war that were easy to say. They're never going to leave. They'll never leave their land. There's got to be at least some portion of people who are just, they don't have anything left. They all believe that they're going to die. They don't see any trajectory for anyone to come to their assistance. The Yemenis are showing that they're there, but what can they actually do for somebody on the ground in Gaza at this moment? It's not very clear. So it's a devastating situation that I don't have a good answer for what the red line will be. Trump sure doesn't seem like the guy who's going to throw up the red line. He's the guy who threw up the Riviera plan with to turn, which is, by the way, something that they've used in every generation of my life. When I first started working in Gaza, they said they were going to turn it into the new Singapore. And then about a decade later, it was the new Dubai that they were talking about. Now it's the new Riviera. So there's these plans for Gaza all along that they've had that never work out, but we have never seen anything like this. The world has never seen the fact that it's on everybody's phones and everyone can see it 24/7, and you don't need the newspaper to tell you. You don't need to turn on the news at all. You have an entire generation of kids now who are coming up without even turning on the news, and they know everything that's happening on the ground from primary sources, and they've been watching it day in and day out. This is a dark moment in human history, and I don't really even know if I have anything articulate to say about it. The depth of the depravity and who it is that's going to step up and say enough of this, because the people that could do that, the United States, they're hand in glove in this. They're not supporters of it.
They're facilitators, and they're actively involved in it. And the buck stops with the empire, and we're just letting it happen. And I would just like to say it's even darker, because I talked about this in November when they first started bombing hospitals. I said when they do this, bombing hospitals will be normalized for the rest of modern warfare forever. So basically, I remember in Afghanistan in 2015, I bring this up a lot. In Afghanistan, Obama, his administration, dropped a Doctors Without Border hospital in Kunduz. It made international headlines. It was so bad they even had to do a cover-up, and no one was officially or formally charged, I believe, but it was such a huge scandal that the U.S. That CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, revised their entire targeting parameters after that.
I remember.
And then no hospitals for the rest of the global war on terror got hit. Nothing ever came close to a medical center because of that. Now, we just, Signalgate revealed that we bombed under construction oncology ward in Sana during one of those. So we dropped an entire tenement building just to kill an engineer. And those are targeting parameters that I personally, like growing up in technical operations centers in JSOC, that's not what we did at all. Those strikes wouldn't even get approved. So yeah, we're entering a whole new, more dangerous world going forward.
That signal chat was something that I wanted to talk to you about, what you thought about that. And you said the two main ones, the one where they said that the engineer was going to his girlfriend's house and they dropped the entire apartment complex. And then they said it in the chat, to leave when there's a war crimes trial for this, when these guys are in The Hague, they left the PC small group chat evidence for everybody to see. And just the way that they talked about the targeting and the way that these guys are doing it in the parking lot of a Walmart while they're shopping on a Saturday afternoon, sending it out, saying send that the fighter jets have taken off and that the MQ-9 Reapers are integrated into what's going on. They basically told us exactly how this all works. And this is a war in Yemen that the United States opened at a time when Israel was still technically in a ceasefire. It was the United States that gave Israel the green light to resume the war in the way that they did, which when the war in Yemen started on March 15th, 2 nights later at 2 a.m. in the morning, Israel resumed the war full on with 80 airstrikes almost simultaneously in under 10 minutes, killed 425 people, 175 children, to kill bureaucrats, to kill municipal officials.
Yeah, they killed the judge, as I recall.
Yeah, they went through the ministries. They killed the ministers of all of the major portfolios, and they killed them in their homes with their families in the middle of the night, knowing that there would be maximum civilian casualties along with that. That if the United States hadn't started their war in Yemen, it wouldn't have been so clear that this was a hand in glove United States operation. So it's just very difficult to see now how Trump steps away from this, because of all the people in the world to not back down to the Americans, Ansar Allah, the Yemenis, lead the way. They have been subjected to 25,000 Saudi US airstrikes over the decade of war. And they didn't back down then. And so the fact that Trump has placed this entire war in the context of, unless what they call the Houthis stand down, the war will continue, really just leaves this wide open for Israel, because the Yemenis are not going to stand down, as we saw with the ballistic missile strike on the tarmac of Ben Gurion Airport through the tens of billions of dollar missile defense array. They're doing the opposite of stepping down, and more than 1,000 U.S. Targets hit. So that's not airstrikes, that's targets hit, many with multiple airstrikes, has done nothing to stop Yemeni fire. They fired 4 ballistic missiles in the 2 days before hitting Ben Gurion Airport. So they've launched a dozen drones just in the last week that reach Israel, or at least come close to reaching Israel, and require scrambling of fighter jets or the use of expensive air defense systems to shoot them down. So there's no impact on Ansar Allah and the Yemenis by the United States war. So you have this kind of open-ended war that it's difficult to see how it ends, because the way it ends is a ceasefire.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what the Yemenis have said.
It's only it's almost like aerial bombing campaigns don't actually work. Look, we've been saying this since the beginning. A lot of the stuff that is being dropped, a lot of the targets being hit in Yemen are like decoys. Anyways, they've been doing this for a long time. They have their own tunnel systems.
Yeah, they're buried deep in the mountains, deep in rocky mountains. And they have the B-2 bombers. They're using the B-2 bombers because they can fire from a distance, because they're worried about Yemeni air defenses. But they haven't used them, apparently, up till now, haven't used them for the heavy bunker busters.
Right, the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators.
And the question is, maybe those could get. There's 2 of them, right? There's the 30,000, and then there's the 5,000, 7,000-pound one. There's 2 criteria of them that haven't been used. There's possible that those may have some effect, but they're not using those.
They were initially developed to collapse the Taliban tunnels in Tora Bora along the Afghan-Pakistan border. Varying degrees of success. They're certainly not going to dismantle these hardened infrastructure with those alone.
No. And so that's the thing. So the way that war ends for Trump is a ceasefire. And he's, on the one hand, allowing Israel to, obviously all of these heavy planes landing in Israel, unloading weapons, is not for the future. This is happening, obviously, as a buildup right now. And so it looks just like open-ended war. It's a dark moment. The signs of any kind of diplomatic track that would complement this savage war just doesn't exist.
Right. And so we'll keep monitoring it. We'll keep reporting on it. But again, the status quo will maintain. I know you have a hard out. I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. Appreciate you.
Oh, anytime, Greg, anytime.
Yeah, it was great. I guess, definitely be in touch. I'm going to stick around for another 10 minutes to talk about what happened in Syria over the weekend. But thanks. This has been Jon Elmer of Electronic Intifada. Links in description. You should check out his work over on that platform. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
All right. Cheers. Okay, y'all. So we're going to keep we're going to keep watching. Edit at 50 minutes. Sorry, I just got to keep this recording going. So if you want to exit out and do your own thing, that's totally cool. Thanks, man. All right. Okay. So anyways, back to the reporting here for the last 10 minutes.
Turn to Syria. You know, we saw extensive Israeli airstrikes in Syria over the weekend and Israeli aid in helping the Druze who are being persecuted under the new regime. What is Israel's objectives in Syria, and could this escalate into war on another front?
I think that the overall strategy, not only of Israel, looking at it globally, the best thing that can happen is to see Syria breaking into autonomies, a Kurd autonomy under a U.S. umbrella,
Yes, to balkanize Syria under a U.S. umbrella. Israel gets some. The Kurds get their own little autonomous region. The Turkish proxies in the north get their own little place. And yes, there's no strong central government. Israel doesn't want it. Turkey doesn't want it. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE don't want it. And they're being very honest about it.
Autonomy under Russia and the Druze autonomy under Israeli umbrella.
yeah. So all these great powers, these regional powers, will have a piece, and the significance of the Druze, and we're going to talk about what happened here in a couple minutes. But let's just finish this out. The Druze is part of their doctrine of the periphery.
This can create for Israel a buffer zone that is controlled by allies, by the Druze. They have 100,000 armed people on the amount of the Druze. And this can enable us to really have some kind of partner, proxy, if you will, that will work with Israel. Israel will help defending them, and they will push Julani forces from the areas south of Damascus. In this way, it can be a win-win. We need a partner inside Syria to help secure our borders, and they need our protection from this, I would say, ISIS, Al-Qaeda forces of Julani that are butchering them the way we saw in the last few days in the outskirts of Damascus. Terrible attack on the Druze community.
So what essentially happened, and this is going to be kind of reductive, but the Al-Shara government, or Julani, if you want to, I don't care what you guys call him. If Yoav Gallant tried to change his name to revamp his political prospects, I'd still call him Yoav Gallant. Anyways, the HTS forces went into the south, into Druze territory, to put it under government control. He was getting a lot of internal pressure to do that. Then they got into conflict. The Israeli Air Force started dropping HTS positions. Hundreds of the militia were killed. Jelani's facing a lot of internal pressure to respond in some way, but he hasn't responded. Essentially, what we're seeing and why the Druze are coming into this, and why Israel, part of the reason they did this was because a lot of the Druze in Israel itself, Israeli passport holding Druze and some of the Druze in the occupied Golan Heights were protesting and making a lot of internal pressure for the Israeli government to come in and do something about this encroachment on Druze territory. Israel's happy to do this because I'm going to show you why. Present, share screen. If you just type in the doctrine of the periphery, here it is. Okay, hang on. The periphery doctrine is a term often associated with Israeli foreign policy, refers to the strategy of establishing alliances and relations with non-Arab states to counter the influence of pan-Arabism, or as some officials back in the 50s called Arab imperialism, and hostile Arab neighbors. This strategy aimed to enhance Israeli security, reduce regional isolation, and manage shared threats, particularly from Iran and Turkey. That's stupid. Israel has always had a good intelligence relationship with Turkey, even though their fighter jets almost got into contact this weekend. So anyways, this whole Druze situation is basically, from the Israeli perspective, enhancing their doctrine of the periphery. The Druze are meant to secure their borders in Syria, create a buffer zone so the Israeli military doesn't have to get their hands dirty. Now, we kind of, and we don't have time to get into it. It's my consensus and the consensus of a lot of my colleagues that Jolani probably, or Al-Shara probably doesn't have a whole lot of time left. He's in a impossible political situation. And I don't know, Hezbollah is no longer the rational actor we don't think that they were. So we'll see what happens if fighting begins again in the north. There's been over 3,500 ceasefire breaches by the Israelis in the south of Lebanon. And yeah, we're going to continue to monitor the situation, report on it. A regional war is more likely now than ever. The entire place is getting destabilized to a point that I think only an Iranian nuclear deal, like an actual Iranian nuclear deal, would work. Of course, Trump keeps going back and forth on that. So again, as John just said, it's like hard to make any predictions. We just have to bear witness, keep pressuring our local officials, representatives. I'm going to Washington, D.C. next week to do some activism stuff. So be looking out for that. I'll post about it. But yeah, this is more of the same thing. We just had to address this new attack plan into Gaza. And yeah, thanks for watching, y'all. It's Monday, May 5th. And it's day 546 of the ongoing genocide. I turned 35 without being sent to Guantanamo Bay yesterday, so I'm also kind of struggling after last night. But hope this was helpful, and we're on Patreon, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. I'm gonna take a nap because it's now my partner's birthday, and we have to do another thing. So kill me, just kill me. All right.